Okay, so let me just open up the deck. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. This is our second ECV College workshop session. I recognize some of the names from the first session, so welcome again. And if you're new, we'll be going over a quick recap on what was discussed during the first session. But today's session will cover the most important part of your college applications, which is the what to include in your personal insight questions. These are also known as your PIQs. And of course, this event is sponsored by ECV for Change. And of course, Melina Duarte, who is our board member, but also just an incredible person in the Coachella Valley, who has years of experience working with college admissions and just providing support for students in the Coachella Valley. So thank you all so much for joining us today. And just again, the agenda for today, just introduction. So as Melina begins doing a quick recap, if y'all can just drop in the chat what school you're coming from and what school you hope to attend. Just a really quick recap. I went to UCLA, so anyone that wants to go to UCLA, I'm always cheering them on, but also love the UC system, Cal State system, community college. We just hope that you all get to apply and hopefully get to the school of your dreams. And then Melina will go over a recap of the previous session. And we won't be doing breakout rooms just because we do have a smaller group today. So we'll be opening it up to any questions that you all may have, especially if you already started writing your statements. So today, take this as an opportunity to just share more about questions that you may have as you're writing these statements. Again, Melina and I are here to help you in your PIQs, especially because you only really have a little over a month to complete your statements, to review them, and to submit your applications. So with that, I'll pass it off to Melina.
So hi everybody, welcome. Thank you for coming again on another Tuesday. Last we all saw each other, at least by our cameras in 2 dimensions, was about a month ago Tuesday. So thank you for coming back. For those of you that have returned, and then for those of you that are, this is your first one, I hope you had a chance to view the video of the last one. I know that we sent that out to folks to look at before. So if you haven't yet, check out that first video because we did go into some details in that one. So just really quickly, so I went to UC Irvine, and I know I have backup on this Zoom if the parents of the people I know are here. So Zat. And I actually stayed at Irvine, worked there for a really long time, read applications for UC Irvine, and then moved to the Bay Area to work for the UC Office of the President, which is like the district office for all of the UCs. And there I connected with UC Berkeley and was reading applications for UC Berkeley. So I know this stuff in and out. The UC applications or admissions director for all of the campuses, her office was like 2 doors down from mine when I was at UCOP. And then I built the Cosmos application based on it. So I understand applications like probably better than a lot of people, only because I've been around it for so long. So I say that because I'm going to give you some tips and tricks, having read and knowing the process of reading. So I'm not sure if you all, I'm going to go over just really quick. So the way the admissions process works is you all fill out, you plus hundreds and thousands of all of your friends, all fill out your applications. And then the first round of applications are usually read by, well, actually, no, now it's at the same time, are read by UC admissions officers. So for those campuses, those 9 campuses, the UC admissions officers are reading them. And then they bring outside folks to also read essays. Actually, the whole thing, because there's just so many applications. So your application will go through at least 2, maybe 3 reads before you are accepted. So that's how the process works. So there are hundreds and thousands of applications that are being read through this very short period of time all across the state. So I want you to keep in mind that the person reading your application, or the people reading your application, are not your parents or you reading everything word for word. We're really just skimming. And we probably have the TV on. We probably have kids running around or making dinner or doing all these extra things. Let's just be real. So we're not focused exactly on every single word of your application, especially your essays. We're really just skimming. And so we're looking for kind of key points. We're looking for key things that you're mentioning to get a whole picture of who you are. But we're not reading. So I say that so that, one, you don't get so caught up in word choices. I know that sometimes we're like, I don't know what that word is. And we spend like 5 days on that one word. Nobody cares about that word, right? People are going to read it and move on. So keep that in mind. Somebody is going to read your essay in probably 2 to 3 minutes. What they tell us is it takes an average of about 7 minutes that we spend on one application. That's reading all of the pieces and giving it a score. So remember that you have to stand out from the get-go. And so we'll go into a little bit of that on the next slide. But this one, so parts of the application, you all should know this by now. I'm sure you're not done with your application, but I'm sure at this point you've at least started. So there are different parts to the application. So activities and volunteer work. Make sure in your activities you highlight if you've had a leadership role, how long you've been a part of that. In that activity section, do not abbreviate. Make sure to spell out the things, because abbreviations are usually only for your school. So unless I go to your school, I'm not going to know what that means. With the example of AVID is all over the place. There's a few of them, but so if you know there is that at another school, then you're probably safe. If it's something specific to your school, make sure you spell it out. You write out the words and not just the acronyms, because the person reading isn't going to know what it is. And beyond that, sometimes the names of the clubs or the activities that you've done doesn't even tell us what it is. So make sure in the activity section, if it's like, I'm just going to say a bridge club, right? Or link club or whatever. What did you do in Link Club? What does Link Club do? Because Link Club could be a different thing at different schools. Link Club at one school could actually be rowing. Link Club at another school could be bridging between freshmen and seniors. So everything is very specific to your location and your school. So make sure you spell out. Assume that the reader doesn't know what you're talking about. It's better to give more information than to have them assume something else. So that's one thing. So activities and volunteer work. In the order that you want to list those activities and volunteer work is the order of you're going to prioritize the ones you've gotten awards in, or you've been in the longest. So if you see that you end up having like this big old list because you kind of did this and you did that and you did this for a little bit, put the things that you did the shortest amount of time or you didn't get an award at the end if you have to. At the end, and if they don't fit, you cut them off. But you're going to put the strongest ones that talk about who you are or give a good example of who you are first. So again, remember, the person is skimming. So when we skim, we usually read word for word, maybe the first 1 or 2 lines, and then we're just like, yeah, whatever, you lost me. So all your important stuff has to go at the beginning. If not, that person's probably thinking about what they're going to eat for dinner later, or that they forgot to turn off the stove or something. AP honors and honor courses, that's pretty self-explanatory. When you're on the application, you're going to pull up your school and it's going to tell you the exact classes with the names of the classes specific to your school. So you're just going to select the one that matches your report cards. Don't fib, don't lie, don't exaggerate, put the grades that are on there. You don't have to turn in your transcripts when you apply. You turn in your transcripts after you've been accepted or if you are audited, which means that they ask to request them. So it is all honor system. Don't do it. Don't try to, I mean, it's honor system until they verify, but they will at some point verify if you are accepted. Your grades, so don't lie about them. Don't say you got a B minus when you got a C plus, not the same thing. And then the insight question. So all of these pieces together tell a story about you. And so the goal is to make sure that all of these pieces tie together to tell a story. So that's where these insight questions come to play. Next slide, please. So quick tips, and we went through them last time, and I feel like you all are probably more into the tips, the writing than you were last time. Last time we did it in September, so you were probably starting to think about it, but now you're probably in the actual writing of all of this stuff and putting it all together. So I'm going to go through some of these. Get straight to the point. Again, skimming. Just remember, skimming. Get straight to the point right from the beginning. Be clear and concise. Don't be wordy. Don't be flowery. Don't try to paint this big story. Just tell me what I need to know so that I can move on. One of the things I always say, having read, hundreds and hundreds and probably thousands of applications, don't start with the quote. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. I want to know about you. I don't want to know about the person who wrote the quote, especially if they've been dead for 1,000 years. So just don't do it. Keep specifically to what you're trying to talk about. Elaborate on your activities. So there is this section where you're gonna list your activities, and then in the personal insight questions, the PIQs, this is when you can actually talk about them. So if you did a summer program and you listed the summer program, and like I did Cosmos my summer before my sophomore and my junior year, this is where you're going to talk about what you did in Cosmos, what class you took, a project you worked on, whatever it is. So this is where you're going to really talk about and describe in detail the stuff, not all the stuff, but some of the stuff that you listed on the application, on the activity section. So this is what I always tell students, because this is how I heard it. You don't really get points for doing the program unless you can talk about the program. So this is where you do that. Your main points should be in your first 1 to 2 lines. So I know that we have all been taught in English class to kind of build up. You start with the quote, you start with the flowery, and then you're kind of coming down to this like main point, right? This one, you're going to flip it. This one, you're going to start with your main point and then you build out. You don't get to your main point. You don't build up. You get to the main point from the get-go. This is who I am, bam. This is what I want to do, bam. And then use the other time to explain it, because you don't know if the person's even going to be reading towards the second, third paragraph. So, and then I don't know. Now in the early days, it was all mashed up and it was all one block. The coding wasn't up to date to be able to see paragraphs. So now you can actually see paragraphs. So main points for 1 to 2 sentences, and just get to the point. Focus on you, and I'm going to park that one for a little bit, and we're going to talk about these other things and explain any obstacles, such as low grades, family obligations or issues that you had, illness, mental health stuff you went through, lack of opportunities or resources in your area, or whatever else that has maybe kept you from doing something specific, or where fill in the gap of the places that the admissions reader is going to see. So every admissions reader is going to look at your grades, right? And they're going to spend a lot of time on that part, actually. So if there is, say, a sophomore year when your grades dipped, explain what happened. If there is a certain subject where your grades aren't as high as the other ones, explain what happened. If there is a whole year or a whole semester where your grades dipped, explain what happened. Or if your activity section is really low because you just haven't, where you're at, you just don't have enough opportunities or resources. And I know, having us all kind of coming out of this whole COVID pandemic, when you all were on school online, that's going to be reflected in your applications, right? Because you won't have had like almost 2 years of activities and sports that you would have if you were in school. So just use these open-ended kind of answers to explain all of those things. You're trying to tell a story, and you want that person to know, like, oh, I need them to know this. This is where you do it. So focus on you. I'm going to spend a little time on this because, one, I don't know about you all, but it's really hard to focus on ourselves. I can talk, I can give you Selena's whole resume and hype her up because she's amazing. I can do all these things, but if you ask me about me, I'm like, yeah, yeah. I'll tell you like one or two things, and then like we get nos da pena, right? We're like, yeah, no. So, one, it gets better as you get older. Two, especially when you realize that other people do it really well and you don't, and you're the one in the room who's like not getting the opportunities, you realize real fast. Um, so, so focus on yourself. I say that because I have read tons. I can't even tell you, hundreds, probably thousands of essays that talk about parent struggles and grandparent struggles. A lot of us come from families who migrated here from Mexico or from any other country. And so there's a whole migration story that comes with that, right? There's, the folks that were born and raised in Mexico and came, some of them came to work, some of them came in through the front door, some of them came in through the back door. And so there's all of these things that go along with that. That is not our story unless that happened to you specifically. That is your parents' story, and that is your grandparents' story. So you can use it as a framing of where you come from. But the struggle and the obstacles and the working from nothing to buy a house and do all of that, that is your parents and your grandparents' story. And, I wish I knew everything that I know now to have been able to help people apply to college later in life with those stories. I mean, imagine like that question about the obstacle, like they could write a whole page on that. I mean, a whole book. Some people have. So that is not your story. That is your parents' story. That is your grandparents' story. So make sure that you tell your story. So we come from families that have these migration stories, that have come from nothing, that have built all these things. But what have you done with that? What have you done in spite of? What have you done because of? So that's your story. What you do in school because of that and knowing where you come from, that's your story. The struggle and the getting here and the working in the fields really hard, and that is probably that's not my story. So I can't talk about that as if that's my story. So I say that because there are only 350 words, and if you spend it talking about your grandparents and your parents, then that doesn't leave any room for you. And as much as we would love to accept your parents and your grandparents for everything that they've overcome, because they show leadership, ingenuity, survival, like all of these things, it's not them who's applying, it's you. So let's go to the next slide. Any questions so far? So Selena, if you come on into the chat, because I get crazy. I get so invested in these conversations. Okay, so here they are. The questions of the hour, the questions of the month, the questions that will be running through your mind until November 30th, when you have to turn in the application. Actually, also, I want to give a side note. It is not how early you turn in the application that determines if you get in or not. It is how good your application is. So do not rush to get your application in until it is exactly where you need it to be. So if you get it in next week, it is not going to be read until after they close on November 30th and they sort through all of the stuff. So do not rush to get this in because you're trying to get it in early. Make sure it is exactly where it needs to be. You've had people help you. You've had people read through it. At least two, maybe three people that have helped you and read through it, so that this is your chance. You get one shot at this. So make sure that it exactly points you in the best light, explains all the things that you need to explain, paints a picture of you to this reader that's going to read it in a whole 5 minutes. So personal insight questions, so PIQs. So these are the 8 PIQs. You have to answer 4 of them, and they are 350 words max. So make sure, actually, what's funny is I've been doing this for so long that technology has changed, the process has changed. So in the earlier days, I used to say, make sure you do the word count in Word, but the word count in Word and the word count on the computer could be different. Depends on who programmed it and how they did it. But now you all are pretty much doing it on Google Docs. Like, no, who uses Word anymore? I still haven't even loaded the license on my computer, and I don't realize it until somebody sends me a Word document. Who sends Word documents? Anyhow, I digress. So make sure that keep under the words, because when you copy and paste that, what happens is it will just chop off the end. So, which is probably fine, because I'm trying to get you to not tell your important stuff at the end and say it in the beginning. So even if your essay got chopped off, it wouldn't worry, right? It wouldn't matter, because it's like just a closing remark. So, but just make sure that you stick under those 350 words. If you're over, have somebody look through it. I know I'm really good at like erasing stuff. One of the things is you don't one of the ways to save words is you don't have to introduce your teachers if you're talking about a teacher. Like, you don't have to say, Mr. Miss Aradia Flores is my Spanish teacher. You can just say my Spanish teacher. Like, the person reading it not going to know who Miss Flores is. You're not going to know, oh, is it Miss Flores or is it Mr. Torres? Which one are you talking about? They're not going to know. They're not going to care. So you can just keep kind of just general subject areas. There's a lot of other little tricks to cutting words, and I'm actually really good at it. So if you need that help later, especially I'm going to put that plug for our third one. I feel like the third workshop is the third workshop is when we're going to get down to the nitty gritty. You all will probably be a lot farther in your essays, and so you're going to need a lot of help at that point. So here are the PIQs, and I broke them down to what it is they're trying to find. So I'm not even going to read through what they are, because what they are, it doesn't even matter. These are the main points that they're trying to get out of you in these essays. Another tip, do not repeat the question when you're answering the question. So don't say, the biggest obstacle, just go into the obstacle. When you start like that, you're lost. You're losing me. So the first question is really looking for leadership and contribution. So when you're talking about things you've done, what has been your leadership role in that, and what did you contribute? If you were not the president of something or the captain of something, or I feel like now you all call each other cabinet members, or we used to call it something else, then that's okay. You can talk about the contribution. So make sure you talk about, I was involved in this activity and this was my role. This is what I did. I either created it, I started it, I helped organize it. I was there from the beginning. I was there putting all the pieces together. I was making the connections. Your role is what they're looking for, because they're looking for your leadership skills and your contribution. The second question is looking for innovation and problem solving. I think this one is the creative. Yeah, I think this one is tell us, everybody's creative. Tell us about something creative you did. This one is looking for How innovative are you? Do you only do the things that you're told, or do you do things because you're curious and you want to do something? You want to create something, you want to research something. And when we do something from scratch, we usually run into some kind of a roadblock. So what did you do when that happened? Did you stop? Did you throw it away, or did you try to figure it out? Did you go back to the beginning? Did you go ask somebody for help? Like, what did you do? So what did you create? Why did you create it? And how did you problem solve anything that came up in that? The third one is a demonstrated talent or skill. So this could be in an academic subject, this could be in your soccer team, this could be you're a musician, whatever it is. Talk about what it is that you do. Also, talk about how you got into it. So sometimes, I know I was working with a student once who talked about mock trials. And so she realized like she had a really good skill of arguing. Surprise, surprise, teenagers. But I asked her, how did you find out about mock trials? And she said, oh, my friend brought me, like took me because she was in it. And then I realized what it was. And I didn't know, like, talk about that stuff. Talk about how you um, found out your skill or your talent, or what you do with it, or how you invest time into it or prioritize it. Talk about all of those things. So they're not really looking to see if you're a genius, like violinist. They're looking to see how much time and energy you put in something when you think you're good at it. How do you build up to being good, not just you're naturally good and you don't do anything to grow that skill or that talent. The next one is education opportunity or educational barriers. So this one, keep to something academic. Academic could also mean a summer academic program, um, an after school academic program, a weekend academic program, whatever it is. That's keep this one to something academic. But what did you do? If you did a summer program of some sort, this is where you want to talk about it. If you had an educational barrier, so say weren't able to do certain academic things that you needed to, like labs, right? Like labs for some of these science classes. I don't have a beaker in my house with all of this chemistry stuff. So is that a barrier you face during COVID time? Or were some of these things not accessible to you because of where you live and who you are and where you come from? And so then maybe that held you back from being able to take biology too because you couldn't do the lab or whatever. I'm just making up stuff, but I hope you're kind of going along with what I'm talking about. The next one is a significant challenge in academics. So number 4 is more of a barrier, something that kept you from. And number 5 is more of a challenge, like you're not good at math and you've had a really hard time and you just can't understand the subject or English or whatever it is. And you had a really big issue. You had a project that either you couldn't get done or you did really bad in, or you had a group project and you ended up being the only one that worked through it, or you just could not get the subject in sophomore year and then you went and talked to the teacher and you got tutoring or something and then you've picked it up since then. So that's kind of where you want to fill in those gaps from your transcripts, from your grades. That's a really good place to fill in those gaps. Number 6, academic motivation. So what motivates you? What do you do outside of just going to class with the schedule that your counselor assigned to you? Like, what do you do beyond that? What do you do because you're interested in? What do you do because you're curious about? So that's and that also could be summer programs if you've done a summer program or a science program or an after school academic program. Because you were interested in something that goes into that academic motivation. I'm really interested in becoming a chemist, and so I helped this lab, or I'm really interested in becoming an environmental scientist, and so I did some work at the Joshua Tree or whatever. I mean, that would be great, right? I mean, it's still an hour away from us that live in the Coachella Valley, but Okay, number 7, involvement in school or community. This is where you'll talk about school or community outreach if you've done volunteer work that you've done, stuff with your church, stuff at home. If you helped with anything COVID related, so if you volunteered to help get people vaccinated, if you helped family members sign up for the vaccinations, because that was a big mess, and people couldn't do it themselves, right? Our viejitos could not sign up for these things themselves. So if you helped somebody or helped people, this is where you want to talk about this stuff. If you if you talk about volunteer stuff, keep it to the things that you did the most. So don't just talk about, I did this thing for 2 hours here, I did this thing for 1 weekend here, I did this thing for 1 weekend 3 years ago. Talk about something that you've done a little more long term so that you can talk about the experience. Either talk about how you got involved, talk about what you did when you were there, talk about if you ran into some problems doing it, or if you changed the whole thing. Like sometimes you get to a place and you're like, oh yeah, you guys need help, let me help you, I'm gonna change this whole thing up. Talk about all of those things, and that's really where you can talk about your school. That could be in the school, or that could be in the community in general. A lot of church stuff usually comes up a lot with church. So make sure if you're talking about church, you're talking about the things you did, and how you maybe you changed something, or how you were, if you taught Sunday school, the little kids during Sunday school, how long did you do it for? How long did you do it? If you just did it once, doesn't really count. If you just did it a couple times, doesn't really count. But if you were there every weekend and there was kids and they were out of control and you helped with that, those are the things you want to talk about. And then number 8 is other things to consider. So number 8 is really where if you couldn't answer something in any of those other things, that's where you want to put it. But I do want to tell you that um, there is no wrong answer for any of these. So if you want to talk about something because you want to talk about it, you could put it in number 8, or you could put it somewhere else. So there is no, this isn't a grade. This isn't who um, who infiltrated the United States of America in 1492, and there's like a right answer, right? This is more like this is about you. So there is no right answer and there is no wrong answer. So make sure that you put in the stuff that you need to put in wherever you need to put it in. So you know your story, and you know, I need them to know this. I need them to know this. I want them to know this. These are the places that you're going to figure out how to put them in and weave them in there. Any questions so far? I do see. Hola, buenas noches. Escuchar información. ¿Sabes, Selena? We should probably do one just in Spanish. Did you see that chat?
Yeah, I just responded to her.
Okay, yeah, maybe we should schedule one that's just in Spanish. Any questions, actually? Any questions? Any questions? I'm gonna run through this really fast, the chat, because I haven't paid attention. Wow, we do have like a whole variety. We could have a whole Valley pep rally right here. Any questions? I know you all have been starting these. I mean, I hope by this point you've started. You don't have to be finished. That is perfectly okay. But I'm sure you all have started and maybe run into some roadblocks, or you want some feedback. We hope that there's a willing soul start conversations. So anybody, this is your time. Was this our last slide, Selena? Selena, was this our last slide? It was, right? That was like
I
questions or
think
something?
so. Yeah.
Okay. So questions. I can be the only one talking. I'm talking for like 30 minutes straight. Nadian? Come on. Tell us where you're at. Tell us where you're having a hard time in. Yes.
Hola, buenas noches. Oh,
Buenas noches.
mucho gusto conocerla. Soy tía de Laura, su amiga. Ella me la recomendó.
Sí, reconocí el apellido. Ya sabía,
Okay.
sabía.
Sí, mire, a mí me hubiera gustado que mi hijo escuchara la información información que usted está dando ahorita porque él es el estudiante, él es de las aplicaciones, pero sigue en la
Sí.
escuela. Cuando se acabe el webinar, ¿dónde me puedo ir para que él accese a escuchar la información? ¿A dónde puedo meterme, ingresar?
Nosotros lo vamos a mandar después de que se acabe la sesión. Entonces, si me da su correo
Le va a
electrónico, ajá, se lo puedo mandar allí.
Muy bien, muy bien. Entonces ahorita lo voy a poner mi email para que me hagan el favor de hacerme la forward, porque sí me interesa que es mucha información y como mamá yo es mi primer hijo, es la primera generación, es la
Sí.
primera experiencia.
Sí.
Es abrumador y todo se le escapa a uno a la cabeza aunque haga notas. Pero entonces para que él escuche.
Pero también tienes a Laura que fue a UC Berkeley.
Sí, ay no. Sí, pero ya ve que ella trabaja, estamos retiradas, sí tengo que poner de mi parte pero sí sirve escuchar todo lo que dice de que no nos don't rush, que se tome su tiempo, nomás que no pase el deadline, todo eso. Sí. Pero sí va a ser de mucha ayuda que él la vuelva a escuchar. Nada más quería saber eso de a dónde la puedo reescuchar y agradecerles por el tiempo que dedican.
¿Cuándo registraste para este?
Yo no supe del primero, Laura me mandó la información y luego me puse a seguirla a usted. Okay. Y le tomé un screenshot a lo que puso en Instagram para grabar las fechas y este es el primero que pude entrar y espero, ya puse mi reminder para el next one, para el de noviembre.
Pero si registraste en el último ayer, ¿no, Celina?
No.
Sí, se acaba de registrar.
Hoy.
Ok.
Hoy, de hecho, no sabía si iba a poder asistir porque no miraba que me llegaba nada por email. Dije, no me llega el link, pero de repente como a las 6:30 me llegó y ya pude ingresar. Pero ahorita en el chat voy a poner mi email. Vas a ver que soy yo porque es Villalba.
And Melina, we have 3 questions.
Gracias.
Sí,
gracias. No, gracias a usted por venir.
The first one is from Juliet. She says, how much weight is the essay compared to the rest of the application?
Oh, that's a good question. I like that question, Juliet. So the essay questions, so they're not really weighted, right? So it's not, you get 10 points here, you get 5 points here, and you get 20 points here. It's the whole story that you're trying to paint. So it's the PIQs answer questions that came up for the reader, the application reader on the other things. So they're not in buckets. You do get points for activities you've been involved in. Again, mainly leadership stuff, like you've been a part of. I mean, for you all, it's a little different because you didn't even go to school for 2 years. You didn't have activities to do for 2 years. So for you all, I don't know how they're going to evaluate that. But so the essays are to fill in the blanks. So this is how I explain it. The essays are going to make or break you. So they're not really about points, but it's either going to give the reader a better context about you, or it's not going to give the reader any information, and just looking at the grades and just looking at the activities doesn't really tell them who you are. So the essays are where it's your voice telling the story. The grades and the classes, everybody else has. So I forgot to make this point. Everybody has great grades. Everybody's taking the right classes. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people have. So you might be number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 at your school, and you have a 4.2, but out of the people applying, probably 80% of the people applying have your same GPA and took your same classes. So how do they decide who comes and who doesn't, who gets accepted to college and who doesn't? It's based on your story and who you are, and this is what helps tell that story. So remember, that's actually the other thing. You might be the best, most amazing person at your school, but you could also just be at par, meaning like at the same level with 100,000 other people who are just as best and amazing at their schools. So how do you set yourself apart? This is where that is. And I know it's really hard for us to do that, especially at your age. I mean, I can do it a little better now because I'm, almost 50, but I couldn't do it at your age. And I get that. So this is where we can help you. This is where we can have conversations with you to kind of pull things out. I know in the last session I mentioned that I was working with a student a couple years ago, and her essays were kind of like not super exciting. She didn't really have like super exciting stuff. And then in talking to her, I found out she was part of mock trial and they went and they won, and it was her first year doing it. Like that's the stuff that we want to pull out of you. Another student, same thing. It was like, I want to be a doctor and I want to save the world and all these things, but it didn't really say anything about her. And then come to find out she said she mentioned in passing as I was talking to her that she played tennis, and I said, "Didn't you guys just win DBL and go to CIF the other day?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, that's the stuff that we want to hear." So it's those kinds of things. Stay away from things that haven't happened. I think that's probably the best advice. Stay away from writing about things that have not happened because they have not happened, right? So it's all just like, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to that. Yeah, I say I'm going to go work out every day and it hasn't happened for like decades, right? So I could say that as much as I want. I could go buy the clothes, I could go, it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. So as much as I talk about it, it doesn't happen. So there's no guarantee that it's going to happen. Going to the gym, it's just not going to happen. So you have to talk about the things that have already happened versus the things that have not happened. I'm going to start using that line a lot more. Because that's what they need to hear. They need to hear about the things that have happened, the things you have already done, the experiences you've already had, the opportunities you've already had, the opportunities you didn't get to have, but you tried to have. So when it comes to the was one about educational barriers or overcoming significant challenges. Maybe there's things that you tried to do and it didn't work for whatever reason. For whatever reason, you either couldn't get there, it didn't get offered at your school, it doesn't happen where you live, whatever it is. So talk about the things that have already happened or didn't happen but you tried to get there versus the things that you want to happen moving forward, because that's all just flowery stuff. That doesn't tell us anything real. Not real. I want you all to fulfill your dreams and all of that good stuff, but it's still all in the future.
Another question from David. He said, "Are letters of recommendations required?"
Not for UCs. Because of the number of students that apply, they do not ask for letters of recommendations. I'm not sure about privates and independent universities. So like the USC, the Stanfords, they might require letters of recommendation, but UCs do not, just because of the amount of students that they have applying. This is why your personal insight questions are really much more important, because there's nobody else to talk about you but you.
And then Julian asked, "Are there any tips on starting a question in terms of wording, like going right into the into the topic?"
Just go straight into it. So don't try to introduce it and like be witty or like big words. Just say it. Just say it. Just spit it out. Just spit it out. Let's say like for education opportunity. I did the Cosmos program during the summer of sophomore year. I had to apply. I found out about it. I had to write a whole application. I got accepted. I went and I did XYZ while I was there. Innovation or problem solving. My freshman year, I wanted to do blah, 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 and it didn't happen, or blah, blah, blah. And so I had to go talk to Miss Flores. Miss Flores helped me to build this satellite I was trying to build. Just go right into it.
And then another question from Jose: "If one already included activities in the activities section and we want to talk about these into the essays, what do you recommend to add into so it cannot be repetitive?"
So actually you want to repeat it. So again, as I mentioned before, the activity section is really just a list, and you can write, I think it's like one or two, like just like 50 words or 20 words or something. So you're just kind of writing what it is. The PIQs is where you really have the conversation about what it is that you did, how you found out about it, how long you've been involved, what things you've learned. Maybe you play sports and you broke your ankle, and you had to get surgery, and so you couldn't play a season. Like, what did that do to you? But so then you had to keep training because then you were out a year. So then you had to come back and weight lift or do whatever to rehab your injury to then be able to come back at the same level that you were before. Whatever it is, the PIQs is where you get to have a full conversation. The activity section is really where you're just texting. You're like, hey, blah, 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 done. The PIQs is where you actually have the conversation about it. Am I answering all of these questions? I know I'm just going and we're going on to the next question. So I want to make sure that
you're
what
answering
I'm
all
saying
of them.
makes sense. Just making sure.
Do other folks have
So I was gonna have another coffee right now, and when I say coffee, I mean espresso because I was feeling a little and then at the end of the day, it's been crazy. But I chose to go for the healthier blueberries, and I feel like super wired now. So choose the healthier blueberries next time. Yeah, ves? Next one.
that was the last
Was that the last
question.
question?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Nice. All right, everybody, we're at 7:50. I'm sure you all have more exciting things to do with your day. So I'm not saying Selena is boring, but I'm just saying. Just kidding. So, any other last questions? I know you all are feeling the stress, the pressure, the anxiety of trying to get this very important essay or essays and application done, right? No pressure, but this will change the rest of your life, just saying. So prioritize and make time to sit down and do this. During the week might not be it because you all are busy, you have things going on, you have school, you have homework, you have sports, you have all of these other things, but take the time to sit down. Maybe it's on Saturday, maybe it's on Sunday, but take the time to sit down and really, really be thoughtful in what you're writing for these applications. Because as most everyone who's gone to college knows, college changes your life. It really does change your life. It changes our generations. You know, once we go to college, that changes our whole generations. I was the first one to go to college, and then everybody else started going to college after me. So that's how it works. So make sure that you spend the time on these applications that is needed. Don't half-ass them. Don't rush through them. This isn't an assignment for 5 points. This is the biggest application you will probably do your entire life. So set aside time, sit down, write through it, maybe just brainstorm. I don't know how far you are. Actually, in the chat, I am curious to know how far you are. So in the chat, write down if you've started them, if you're almost finished with them, if you feel you're almost finished with them, because when we talk next time, we might make you undo some of that for your benefit. So I want to know kind of where you're at. So throw that in the chat, where you're at in the process. You're still brainstorming, you're still, just putting stuff down, or you've already started writing the essays, you're 2 to 3 in, kind of where you're at. But
Melina, really quick, Ms. Lotus had a question on the chat. She
yes.
said, I noticed that there are some questions on the application that ask you to explain anything you need to explain. How are these different from PIQs, and do you have any tips for these?
So this is really where you write things that a couple examples come to mind. For kids that are foster kids, this is where they kind of explain that. This is where they talk about, you know what, because you can't really talk if you're trying to talk about all these other things. That's the space that they talk about it. If you have like a huge if you have a disability, that's kind of where you talk about it. So that's kind of that extra like, and you also should know these things about me. So there are things that they really want to know about you, and those PIQs are designed to try to get stuff out of you. But then there's the other like, I could say this somewhere, but this is where I want to tell you this. Still brainstorming. Wait, is Juliet Rodriguez Julie like my dear Indio friend? I knew it. See, these are all my Instagram friends, or my LinkedIn friends, or my Facebook friends, or their kids. I started writing stuff down, blocking down PIQs. Take it in pieces. So it's really overwhelming when we try to take on this huge important project all at once. Take it in pieces. So that's why I think outlining, like, okay, I think I want to write, like, just put number 1 through 8 down and write down what you would kind of write, not in sentences, but ideas, thoughts and ideas, or things you would talk about. I would talk about this program here. I would talk about this here. I would talk about this here, this here. And then see how you can narrow down to the 4 that probably say the most about you. So just outline, brainstorm. That's the biggest piece. I think once you figure out what you're going to write, it's easier to write it if you already have the outline and know how to frame it. And remember when I said before, you don't have to, this doesn't have to be a poetic essay. This doesn't have to be a Pulitzer Prize winning essay. This has to be an essay that tells me about you in pretty much the shortest amount of words, like to the point, to the point. So, even if you have 350 words, I'm not reading 350 words. You probably could have told me in 100 words. 200 words is probably good. Don't worry about filling up 350 words. Once you start writing and you get into the groove, then you're like, oh, and then this and right? And we start going, and then you have to come back and cut some of those words. But don't worry about filling 350 words. It's not who filled up the most words and got it in fastest that wins. It's who do I feel told me the best story about themselves and makes me want them at the campus, UC Irvine campus specifically. Just saying. Another plug for UC Irvine. Are there any more questions?
No, I think that's it. So I know we're almost at time, but just for next session, it's on November 15th. So all of you all that are on this session or on this Zoom call, you all signed up already. So in the next maybe 2 or 3, well, actually we only have like a month before the next session. So many of you all still haven't completed them. Many of you have started brainstorming them. But in the next 2 weeks or so, we'll be reaching out so that you can send us the ones that you have already completed, even if they're really rough drafts, because on the final session, we'll actually be having folks joining us that will be reviewing or have already reviewed your statements in advance, so that when you join on the next session, you're already just receiving feedback and you're prepared to submit your statements by the deadline on November. So just make sure within like the next 2 weeks you start, even if it's just bullet points, even if it's incomplete sentences, whatever it is, make sure you already have something so that you can send it to us when we reach out and we get to pair you with someone. Because if you don't do this for the next session, you won't be paired with anyone since they'll be reviewing these statements prior to the last session on November 15th. So does that make sense to everyone here on this call? Do you all have any final questions before we wrap up? Great. Well, yes, Ms. Flores, they could still sign up. And of course, like just make sure to have them sign up through the link, through the form that you signed up in. That way they're able to receive the emails, because if they don't receive the emails, that indicates that they didn't sign up. And we don't unfortunately have the time to like find students. It's the students that have already signed up. Anthony will be sending out an email to everyone that has signed up to our sessions. And from there, you'll be able to respond with your PIQs. So we'll be the ones reaching out to you. We have your contact information. If you were able to join the Zoom link, then that means you submitted the correct email address. I know we had like 5 email addresses that bounced back. So if you're here right now, that means that you got our email, we have your information, and we'll be reaching out and you'll be able to send us your PIQs. So we'll be reaching out to you all. You don't have to do that. We'll do that. And then you can let us know whether or not you'll be joining the session. And that's where you'll receive one-on-one support from another college student.
A grad student.
A grad
All
student.
Cilinux friends are grad students.
All of my friends.
I was gonna, so last time, for those of you that were at the session last time, I did make the promise that if you attended all three, that we would raffle off. I will pay for an admissions cost for UC Irvine. I get to make up the rules since I'm paying for it, right? So I will Venmo somebody, what is it, like $80, I think, to apply, to make sure that you can apply to another school, so that you apply to Irvine, because that's just the best school ever. And so for those of you that, oh, there we go, Miss Rodriguez, my friend. Hey, Julia, I'm going to see you on Saturday and Sunday. But I digress. So look, Miss Rodriguez and family, her husband is a crazy bicyclist. He's crazy. They are going to sponsor a college application for UC Berkeley, UC Santa Barbara, which is a beautiful campus. If you haven't had a chance to go visit them, try to go visit them. Go online. There are a lot of, Daniel, are you related to David? There's a lot of ways to see these campuses now. UC Santa Barbara is a beautiful campus. I did get to spend some time there, and it's literally next to the beach. Not that it's hot, because it's cold a lot of that time that you're at school, but it's a beautiful place to be. It's dark, so you could see the sun, the stars. It's a beautiful place. So, Miss Julie says she will sponsor a UC Santa Barbara. Oh, Dave, I thought you were Daniel Peralta. I thought you were related to David and Lupe Peralta, but I guess you're not. So anyhow, thank you all for joining us. Set aside the time to do this, to just sit down, turn off your phone, turn off social media, do the do not disturb, and at least a couple, like an hour here, an hour there, an hour there, because this will change your life. You want to get into schools that you have been dreaming about all of your life, not end up going to the schools that accepted you because all these other schools didn't. So PIQs, as I said before, will make you or break you. So make sure you put in the time. This is the most important piece. You've already done all the other stuff. You can't undo your grades, you can't undo your classes you take. The only thing that you have complete control over right now is what you write about all of this stuff and everything that you did, and how you write it and how you position yourself. So make sure that you set aside that time to do it. And we will see you all on, when is it? November 15th? Mm-hmm. November 15th. So see you all then. Parents, make sure you vote. November 8th. Your ballots just got dropped to you, so make sure that you turn them in.
Thank
if you
you
want
all
suggestions,
so
send me an email.